Hey Tim, how you doing today?
Good.
We're here today because you guys are one of our best shops. We love the partnership that we have with you guys, and the quality of work that we see when we're here calling on your shop is just above and beyond what we see anywhere else in the general market.
We work really hard at it.
Good. No, it's definitely tells, and every little detail that we see, not even related to the brake products that we're talking about today, but I see some guys doing the hub work next door, and they're torquing with a torque wrench properly instead of using the air gun. They're grinding down the wheel before they put it back on the hub face, so there's no run out. That usually gets blamed on the rotors, but when actuality there's other issues behind that. So I see you guys taking the extra steps I don't see other shops taking, but I expect that too with picking the quality products that you pick and sticking with things that are of a higher grade quality and not going with what's the cheapest just to get people in the door and get things going. So what is the most important thing about the brake inspection for you guys? What are you typically looking for when you get the car on the lift, that you telltale signs?
Efficient and effective brake repair and diagnosis starts in the office.
Oh my gosh,
it's
yes.
Asking the right questions, the when, where, how, what were you driving? Had you been driving all day, or was this the first head out of the neighborhood? It's important to manage a lead that comes into our shop, or a new customer, even an old customer that or returning, that comes in and knows they need brake service. It's really quick from the I need front brakes. Well, the first step is, as you mentioned, a thorough, proper inspection. It includes a couple different things, because really not all the time does a brake pad wear out just because it's aged and fulfilled its service life.
Right.
Often it's some trait of the components of the brake system not functioning properly that lead to premature wear. Centric makes a very high quality component. There's nothing in your line that's not done to the properly and to the best of your guys' abilities as a manufacturer. All parts are not equal. When what we fight all day is we believe very strongly in the product line that sitting on this bench in front of everybody. They're not all equal. A lot of the time when you see a rotor that's $20-$30 cheaper than another one, or one of the other offerings without mentioning any, a lot of the time they've taken material out of these faces. They've increased the fin width so that they can remove some weight, because in their manufacturing, less weight's less money.
Plates are thinner. Sometimes they'll take fins out. You do a fin count on the OE one, will have 45, and theirs will have 35 or
this
something like that.
This is something we see every day that we wish, and that's why we're here making this video for those of you watching, is a lot of this, if you're not elbows deep and head into these cars every day, you wouldn't see these subtleties that there's a reason that give or take $50 or $100 in a brake job, truly you're getting what you pay for if the provider that you're selecting to do the work is sourcing the right components. Not all brake issues are the same. Brakes wear out for a couple different reasons, and it's important to identify and pinpoint exactly what caused the brakes on that car to wear out, if it's not just age and mileage.
Yeah, I've noticed in my experience over the years and working in different markets, Florida, for instance, is where I cut my teeth. Down there, the technicians don't run into, I would say, half of the problems that you guys end up having with the brakes here, because they don't spray the roads with brine down there. They don't have the winter seasons. I mean, I noticed over the last 6 years I've been here, as soon as that brine starts hitting the roads, that the noise complaints come up a little bit. The pads start sticking in the hardware because the corrosion gets into the hardware and starts gumming things up. Pads start not moving properly when the customer releases the pedal, and that's where your inspection will definitely see a lot of those things. And a lot of times you can probably just clean up the hardware and send the customer down the road.
Most of the time,
most of the time, especially if you see that pad that's hung up in there. That's
what we've talked about some other times that you've done site visits and kind of watched some of our guys in action. One time we kind of pulled into the numbers and realized that basically almost half of the axles worth of brake jobs that a facility like Hollenshades does, most of them are service. They're not actual parts replacement. A good set of brake pads, and you have much more data than we do, but maybe on our side we say that a good set of brake pads should last anywhere between, I know it's a big window, but let's say 30 to 50,000 miles. Maybe give or take.
But bigger window, smaller window, longer frame. I think. I think if you were talking about maybe an entry level pad that we offer for some shops that want that really low price point, that mileage is probably right on the money. With the products that you guys are using, I would be shocked to see regular conservative normal drivers get less than 70 to 85,000 miles.
I know a lot of it comes down to, and that's where we see as multiple. We're not a dealership beholden to like one brand. That we service all makes and models. some of those are application specific. The service on the brake repair, like you mentioned, the salt and the brine on the roads, it's not a joke up here.
Nasty stuff.
Yeah, we see it. I mean, a lot of you guys, if you go on vacation and you kind of peek through your wheels after a week of not using the car when you get back to the airport, peek in there and look at what, this is not corrosion free,
Exactly.
ferrous material at all.
No, it's iron and iron rust. That's one of the things that we've struggled with all the time is this face is gonna, in this dewy, misty type of rainy thing, you're gonna get spots on there if the pad's not swiping that clean.
So inside our logics, about every 2 years, we recommend that, even if the brake pads are not worn out and that, they are above 30% life remaining, we'll recommend that, for an hour's time, give or take like $100, we'll go in and we'll clean up, relube, make sure the caliper slides are free, make sure that ultimately that pad is going to fulfill its expected use life.
Yeah, the rubber components are not dried out and cracked. That's definitely one to keep an eye on for sure. So excellent.
Right. Well, do we want to jump into anything on the table, or do you have any?
Let's talk about some product here. One of the things that I know that shops are exposed to all the time nowadays is the customer comes in. Number one question with brakes, man, how dusty are they? We don't want dusty brakes, So
especially if they have aluminum, chrome wheels or some kind of performance.
Absolutely. Well, and nowadays too, you're decent entry level to just a peek over an entry level Honda or Toyota comes with a 17 or an 18-inch wheel now that's wide open. You can see the entire braking system. So, customers, when they come in and spend the money on that, they want that to look like it came off the factory floor. And one of the reasons we found over the years that the dealerships are actually coating the rotors is for that specific reason, so that when you buy a brand new car, it doesn't have a rusty rotor on it when it's a brand new car, because if they didn't put a coating on it like this or a similar coating to this.
Two different options.
Yep. So Centric was one of the first companies to come out with this particular coating here. This is our black electrostatic coating. So this rotor is actually coated exactly like a chrome bumper from back in the day. Some people might remember back in those days. But what we do is we negatively charge this rotor and it gets dipped in a positive vat of paint so that this is actually sucked into the pores of the iron. And this passes a 400-hour salt spray test. So we can put this in a machine and just spray it with a saltwater mist. And the only thing that will rust is the face where the pad swipes. There'll be no rust on the hat.
Just to interject, I want to make it clear to everybody, to those watching, that there's two areas of the hat. He's also talking about down inside the fins. The only reason I wanted to digress for a minute is people always ask, why can't you turn my rotors anymore? Okay. And there's like two different really major components to the answer. That fuel economy. Weight is fuel economy. In the first place that the manufacturers, when they were chasing the fuel economy game 10, 15 years ago, the first place to strip 20 pounds or more out of the vehicle was in the rotors. Yep. Those rotors that people recall, going through 3 sets of pads with and turning them each time and getting them nice to true. That really did work, and it was the way that the automotive aftermarket industry kind of centered around, was turning rotors and replacing pads. But as they strip the material away, there just isn't the amount of material for us to take a machining cut off of each side. The second reason, and this is what got me going on this now, is we can turn rotors. We still have two brake lays here that we use regularly. We can get a nice smooth surface to get the customer down the road 10,000 miles, but at Hollenshades, with what people come to expect from us is they're not looking for a 10,000. We're not, we don't care to offer a short-term 10,000 mile brake job or a fix. So where we're getting at was a lot of it's the issue with the corrosion in the fins. The fins in the center is for cooling. So it's one thing to get a nice smooth brake rotor driving out for 10,000 miles, but with corrosion and rust just built up all over the fins, there's no cooling ability to that rotor. And just from experience, 10,000 miles, within 1 year down the road, and they're getting the pulsation back, and unfortunately too often that's put on poor components and not, just understanding how vehicles are made now, what's changed, and what a service provider like Hollenshades needs to do to make sure that it's a lasting repair. Yeah, well, and I'm glad you got off topic because it's part of the topic. So in light of that too, as you cut a rotor down, this is actually a huge heat sink. A lot of people aren't really looking at it as such, but it's a heat sink. If you ever watch any kind of racing, you'll see the rotors glowing. It is literally a heat sink, and it's designed to heat the friction material up,
to the right temperature so that it can engage with the rotor and do its job. Then the hotter it gets, the stickier the friction material gets, which we call mu, which gives it the stickiness and slows the car down. It's not just the clamping force. The clamping force is actually to generate heat, to put heat into the pads to make the friction material work the way it was designed to work. As you cut the rotor down and it gets thinner, it runs a little bit hotter, which will also wear the pads down faster. So that's another reason to go ahead and replace with new rotors.
Not to get way off topic, but even wheel bearings, there's a lot of talk that heat doesn't just stop in the rotor, that it's transmitted into the wheel bearing, into the chassis of the vehicle.
And absolutely, because the way that the rotor is designed, you have the hat on this side, this is attached to the wheel, so this rotor is going to inherently get hotter on the inbound side because the mass is here, this is attached to the wheel, so that heat is just going to really get cooking on the inbound side a lot. So the thinner it gets, the more prevalent that gets. And I'm sure you guys have seen customers that are coming in with, from shops where they didn't have a good experience with the brake job. You'll see that inbound pad worn out more than the outbound pad quite a bit. And it's not because it's hanging up in the caliper. It's literally because it's just running hotter. Or that two-footed driver, sometimes they'll also create that heat because they leave their foot on the brake just a tiny bit and they leave it running hot. So then it's always going to run hotter in here, especially if they're putting that much heat into it.
He's referring to a floating caliper. The way it works is there's one hydraulic piston. It pushes the inboard pad first, and then through slide pins, it pulls the outer. Just that why somebody that's kind of 2 foot active while driving is touching the inner pad a lot more. That's the first to engage with the rotor before in a floating caliper design. I got to point out something that means everything to us, and it's why we've kind of, in short, fallen in love with this product line. OE. There's most vendors that come in carrying different lines of brake pads. They're either so focused on price or focused on applications. You guys are I've realized in our couple years of the relationship we've built with, through Parts Authority with your guys' brand, OE, if you cannot turn out or don't have the ability to know what OE is and what you guys are designing an aftermarket option to, you don't make it.
Right.
So what we know that when they've chosen to put something in their product line that it is made to OE standard, you're aware of what those standards are, and should there be problems, you guys work very closely with some very technical people that can get to the bottom of what's going on.
We actually have an OEM library at Centric back in the City of Industry in California. Every single part that we catalog and sell, we have the OEM sample basically in our own parts store.
Okay.
So if you were to call our tech department, that tech guy could hop up, run back to the shelf, grab the OEM part. I mean, hopefully it's not a Crown Vic, because there's like 10 different rotors back there for a Crown Vic, because that car was around so long. Ford had so many different suppliers, but we have every single sample of that component that they ever had for a Crown Victoria. Every time they changed the vendor, we would buy the new sample, and that's the same for all the parts.
I didn't think it was by chance, but I'm glad you clarified that up for us. So let's turn the tables a little bit. You've asked me a lot of questions, and we both shared a little bit. So I got to know a little bit more here. We've covered the rotors. The 120s are incredible. I can't even think of any complaint we've ever had putting these on a vehicle. We have shifted to stocking a lot more of the 320s.
GCX,
we have. I'm knocking on wood as I say this, but this is a solid. It's etched. It's coated properly, and so we've exhausted the brake rotors. But the other kind of huge positive and value added in your product line is the multitude of pad options.
Absolutely.
So I'm a little, I know we carry the 105s. We stock the 105s. We've been getting really familiar with what they call the 500s, and you've already kind of briefly talked about the tactical. So run us through a couple of these. What do we got going on here?
Well, one of the things that we do at Centric is we're going to give you a component that is equal to or better than what the car came with, and then we will offer you different variations depending on the type of customer. If it's a fleet that you're selling, if it's a Uber or a Lyft fleet or something like that, people with high mileage have a little bit different requirements for that stuff. If you have someone, you always get the person that comes in and says they're selling their car next week, what's the cheapest thing you can put on there.
Yet it keeps coming in every 3,000 miles for an oil change.
Exactly. That deal fell through. Every shop's heard that a million different times. But one of the things we're getting to is your customers are coming in, and what's happening in the industry is people want the clean wheels. They don't want the dust. What we do in that case is when we first started out, if it didn't come ceramic, we wouldn't make it that way. But because the industry kept going that way, we kind of bend a little bit like that, and we will make it that way now. But a lot of guys will come in, and I see it all the time, like with a Corvette, or a Mustang, and they're spirited drivers, because if you had a sports car, that Camaro or whatever, 500 horsepower nowadays, pretty common stock option nowadays. You're going to get on it, and you're going to have some brake dust. The harder you drive, the more dust you have, the faster you're going to wear the pads. And I get it a lot where those guys will come in and they'll be like, I don't want dust. And I'm like, so do you want to crash? Because there's your other option. Because if we put this ceramic pad on here that's softer and designed more for your minivan or your small passenger car onto your performance vehicle, then in your performance vehicle came with a metallic pad, as most sports cars do come with metallic pads. I mean, any car that you see with the big brake kit on it, for instance, is going to have a metallic pad or some kind of carbon ceramic.
And just to clarify for those watching, there's ceramic and semi-metallic,
and then severe duty for your trucks and your 3/4 ton and up
not to interject. Where does the copper? One big change that's happened in the brake parts is the removal of copper from the pad construction. And copper, people wouldn't think copper in brake pads, but it actually really serves some very important traits. Copper, as anybody who, most people know, it's soft. Yep. So it absorbed a lot of vibration, which vibration is noise. And also, if you guys heavy metal, it absorbed a lot of heat. So the regulation requirement to get copper out of the brake pads was not a small change. And I know you guys have been working really hard for over 5 years to get this right.
Everyone's been affected by that. On every label of the pads now, it'll have 3 leaves on it, depending on how the leaf is shaded. So this has 1 leaf shaded of the 3.
Okay.
So this means this would be it's when this date of manufacture was on this, that it was compliant for that particular. When all 3 leaves are full, which you already see on a semi-metallic and severe duty pads, they never had copper in them because they weren't ceramic. So instantly they already qualified for that because they didn't have to take those out. But we've been testing with our dynos, removing the copper per the mandates, per the federal mandates.
I do see is that they won't be able just a little bit, but I haven't been doing this quite as long as you, but I can tell that that is far less than we you used to kind of see a sheen across the pad after it had been kind of deglazed.
It's been such an integral part of pad formulation with the ceramic pads for so long. You can't just take it out all right away, and that's why the government's let us make these changes gradually to make sure that we have time to test the products. And we have 4 brake dynos at Centric, and we can take those dynos and we can tell Toyota Racing Development to take a break for a week while we test some stuff. And
you also got us on to one thing though. Hollenshades, 80 years. We've seen a lot of different iterations and chapters of this industry. And one thing that we don't take lightly is the commitment to get it right and listening to our feedback. That's one that we knew right away from the get-go when we switched from. We went through. Brake products are a large percentage of what we do, so it's one of the product lines like suspension ball joints. These are major repairs or high dollar repairs that we want to get right, and we take a lot of pride in making sure we get those right as much as possibly. We exhaustively track our comebacks to understand why they happen. And on that note, you're one of the first vendors. There's a lot of different product lines and vendors where we call up and we say, hey, I got a problem here. Your drive axle or such and such part, failed, and I it hasn't been long enough. This shouldn't have happened, and I know my guy put it on right.
Right. Yeah.
There's a lot of them. Oh, I'll send you a new one. Do you want the old one? No, just throw it away. Right. And you mentioned the dynos. It got me thinking that you were one of the first vendors that when we said, hey, we're having a noise problem with this certain application, it's the 3rd one in the last 6 months, we wouldn't call you if it wasn't 3 and we're convinced that there's an application issue. Your first response was, take everything off the car, I want it all.
Right.
To get it to the dyno to make sure that pad and that rotor that we had the issue with were going to be put together in an engineering environment, and you guys were going to figure out why exactly it was happening.
Right,
and that's not something that we're light on. That means everything to us.
Well, what I found over the years too is that this, as simple as a brake job appears to be to everybody, it's a very complex system. There's a lot of engineering going on here. One of the biggest things that people don't realize is the bed-in procedure that needs to happen with the pads, which typically takes your normal driver about 500 miles to naturally occur, where you'll have this pad. We'll create a transfer layer onto the face of the rotor surface, because the pad is not just biting the rotor and stopping the rotor. The material is actually marrying the iron.
Sometimes I've heard of the analogy when you're using an eraser, like in grade school a little bit with you're rubbing it.
Right. Once your transfer layer is on there, then your friction will continue to lay on top of that transfer layer and erase itself off and replace itself and erase itself and place itself, and that's why the pad wears down, because that's constantly going on and going on and going on.
What you got me thinking was it's not always a pulsation. Sometimes somebody says they have a pulsation, which is the most common.
Yep.
So it's easy to say, okay, I understand what you mean, no worries, thank you. Keys, we'll give you a call in an hour or two once we can look at it. But sometimes that layer, it's a surginess to the brake, and that is a very different issue. That the root cause of that is there are different root causes. That's important.
Oh, there's so many different root causes. I mean, one of the main root causes is when you get corrosion build up under the hat between the hub face. Sure. If someone, let's say you took this off to resurface it on one of your brake lathes, and we know you guys clean the inside of the hat, but most shops do not. Right. And if they didn't put this back on the hub exactly in the bolt pattern that it came off, they put it a little bit this way, then they didn't index it right, then all of a sudden there's run out on the rotor and it's gonna have a pulsation.
We even see people do, ball joint or something where the wheel needs to come off. So once the rim's removed off the vehicle, this is a little bit loose, depending on the application. It's not uncommon that rust that grew up on the hub or flange to fall down in that gap. So when the job's complete, sometimes they never even, a brake repair really wasn't even performed, but the wheel was taken off. That's something that happens from time to time. You talked about the bed-in procedure, so that's one that's sensitive to us doing this as frequently and as often, and also servicing such a wide range of driving pattern customers, all from the soccer mom in stop and go traffic to the spirited driver that we're talking about. So you guys have a very unique, this is a first for us that I didn't even know of these things being around, that you actually, so go ahead and explain this to me.
We're going through some iterations. Originally, what we've done on the Posi Quiet pads, our first thing that we've done is we scorch the surface of the pad. The reason that we scorch the surface of the pad is at 1600 degrees, basically we're baking it or broiling it, if you want to call it. And what we're doing is we're removing all the resins and epoxies that we use to press and manufacture the pad off of the very face of it, so that you have nothing but friction material engaging with the rotor face, transferring and starting to marry there. The second thing is you'll see that most manufacturers in the aftermarket have gone to this crossed hatch finished design on the rotor, where it's an X mark like that instead of the old style record cut.
And we're always in the business of delivering value, and if we're needing to take 20 minutes test drives in every vehicle, unfortunately then that would trickle down to the cost of the service we're providing.
Your ticket would have to go up. And
value added, thank you Centric, you guys have the 500 option.
Right, so the 500 option, what this does is this is naturally going to occur over 500 miles depending on how aggressive your driver is. The PQ Pros and the Tacticals, what we've added here is our Mu 500 coating on the face of the rotor. So what this does is it beds the rotor instantly. This material will instantly marry the rotor, and it will give you the same torque specs as an OEM brake system after 500 miles right out of the gate. So this is just another thing for you guys where, it's just an instant bed in, it's more value for the customer. They're gonna have that same pedal feel that they had when they brought the car in here, assuming that they were just coming in for worn out pads, for instance. So,
So to kind of get towards closing, I just wanted to, reinforce to anybody watching out there, especially if, you're a service manager or service advisor, or another shop owner, or, one of the greatest things is we don't fall on a brake line, as I've kind of mentioned earlier in our conversations here, that we don't just jump in with a brake line as involved as we've been with Centric lightly, and it doesn't happen overnight. We actually went through, when we switched from a line that was being discontinued by a parent company to ultimately finding our way to you, that took 2.5 years, and we went through about two to three different other lines before we were confident, again, coming this full circle with one line, and we're pleasantly surprised, or not surprised, we were expecting it as we got to know you. But one of the biggest values to us is, did we have that confidence in the Centric line of products that you guys offer everything for us? All makes and models also kind of insinuates all types of drivers and all types of customers. We get to stay in the Centric line of products with your guys' line, through the suppliers that you're getting them to us through. and we really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point too. And like you said earlier, like we were talking about, our competitors they just sell a rotor, for instance, or they might just sell brake pads. The difference with Centric, and that the reason that Hollenshades I think likes this too, is that if you needed a caliper, it's going to be ours. If you needed a wheel bearing, it could be ours. If our local distributor had that particular, even down to chassis, if our local distributor had chassis, it could be ours. The brake hose could be ours. So every component on that vehicle can be from the same manufacturer instead of a rotor from someone, a hose from somebody else, a caliper from this guy. And then, when there's a problem,
everybody points the finger at the other. That's been closing quality products. If customers out there or other shops, want to elevate, the quality of their work and what they're able to deliver for customers. Brands like Centrics are things they should have, kind of in their radar and working hard to make sure they can get those on their customers' cars.
Absolutely. And shops like Hollenshades, for sure, man. We recommend a lot of people to come here for you guys because we know they're not going to be unsatisfied by any means.
80 years, no plan on slowing down.
Yep, good. Well,
thank you guys very much. Appreciate it. And thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it. Feel free to comment at the bottom of the videos or anything with your questions, and we'll do everything we can to follow up and answer those for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great 2020, everybody.